Years ago, the great screen actor Jimmy Cagney was working with a young actress that was about to be fired. He went to the director and said, "Let me talk to her." And he walked over to the actress and he said, "Look, it's simple. You walk in the room, you plant your feet, look me in the eye, and tell the truth." The logo of the X-Files is "The truth is out there." The truth is out there. I'm going to paraphrase. The truth is in here. You're about to hear the truth. I'm an actor. My name is John Cipher. For 7 years, I walked through the door, planted my feet, and tried to tell the truth as Chief Daniels on Hill Street Blues, as General Craig on the hit sitcom Major Dad. I was 2 years on Dynasty. You're on Knots Landing. I've done 5 afternoon soap operas, 12 Broadway shows, and 20 films. One of the Broadway shows I did was the great musical Man of La Mancha on Broadway. I was Richard Kiley's original understudy. I sang the words to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go. I'm here to introduce your host this morning, Dr. Stephen Grier. He's a man who is running pell-mell where the brave dare not go. He was an emergency room physician. In fact, the director of emergency medicine at a major hospital in North Carolina. 3 years ago, he sat his wife and his 4 daughters down and said, "I've been doing this part-time, running after the truth, for 7 years now. Now I'm going to do it full-time." He walked away from all that money to pursue the truth. I always think of Hamlet's great line to Horatio, "There are more things between heaven and hell than are dreamed of in your philosophy, Horatio." I'm going to introduce a man who says, there are more things between heaven and hell than any of us have accepted. And I have the witnesses and the documents to prove it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Stephen Grier.
Thank you very much, John. Members of the press, the American public, and people of the world. We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. I would like to thank Sarah McClendon, who is with us today, the famed White House correspondent, for her sponsorship of this meeting. Thank you very much, Sarah. In 1993, a group of military advisors to this project and I met out in the countryside in Virginia. And we decided that it was time for civilians, military, intelligence, and other people to come together to disclose the truth about the subject which is called UFOs. Since that time, I have personally briefed a sitting director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, President Clinton's first CIA director. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, many members of Congress, members of the European leadership, the Japanese cabinet, and others. And what I have found is that none of them are surprised that this is true, but they are uniformly horrified that they have not had access to these projects. We can establish through these witnesses whom we have identified, which now number over 400, and these are people who have been inside the CIA, NSA, NRO, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all divisions of the intelligence and military community, as well as corporate witnesses, contractors to the government. And these are folks who have been involved in so-called black budget or covert unacknowledged projects. These unacknowledged special access projects are taking in at least $40 to $80 billion per year. And they are sitting on technologies that can change the world forever. The reason we are coming forward now is that we are asking for the U.S. Congress and for President Bush to move towards an official inquiry and disclosure on this subject. It has the most profound implications for the human future, for the U.S. national security, and for world peace. Specifically, technologies connected to UFO and extraterrestrial vehicles, if declassified and used for peaceful energy generation and propulsion, would solve the looming energy crisis definitively, would end global warming, would correct the environmental challenges that the Earth is facing. It is also critical that we begin to debate as a society the propriety of placing weapons in space. If indeed, as we can prove, it is true that we are not alone and that space is territory which we are sharing with other civilizations, it could be a very imprudent, destabilizing thing to place weapons in space. This is not being debated because it is off the national and international radar screens. It needs to be placed on it, and we are here today to do it. We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, that they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States, that extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 administrations that we are aware of, presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security. There is no evidence, I wish to emphasize, that these life forms from elsewhere are hostile towards us. But there is a great deal of evidence that they are concerned with our hostility. There are times when they have neutralized or rendered inert the launch capabilities of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Witnesses here today will describe those events to you. They have shown clearly that they do not want us to weaponize space, and yet we are proceeding down that dangerous path. And it will be established that these projects, because they have not been supervised properly by the Congress, by the U.S. President, by the international community, have become a threat to the national security. And for this reason, we feel we must disclose the facts. This is the beginning of the campaign for disclosure. And in a memo that I wrote to President Bush last week, I've stated that this campaign will persist until our goals are met, and they are as follows: that we have open, honest hearings on the subject in the U.S. Congress, that there be a permanent ban on the weaponization of space or the targeting of any objects of extraterrestrial origin, that there be a full and complete study of classified technologies connected to this subject to see how they could be properly declassified and applied for peaceful energy generation so that the world may get off of fossil fuels in enough time to prevent greater ecosystem damage or war over the looming energy crisis, which is sure to sweep the earth in the coming decade. This is a matter of the most pressing import. It has been ridiculed, yes. I know many in the media would like to talk about little green men. But in reality, the subject is laughed at because it is so serious. I have had grown men weep who are in the Pentagon, who are members of Congress, and who have said to me, what are we going to do? Here's what we will do. We will see that this matter is properly disclosed, and these courageous witnesses, the first 21 of over 100 that we have already interviewed on videotape, have stepped forward to speak the truth. Now, I expect people to be skeptical, but not irrationally so, because these men and women have come forward and they have their credentials, they can establish who they are, and they have been first-hand witnesses to some of the most important events in the history of the human race. As was pointed out to me by some of the men here, they were charged with handling the nuclear weapons of the United States. Their word was trusted on everything of great importance for the national security. We must trust their word now. As Monsignor Balducci said at the Vatican, in an interview I had with him recently, it is irrational not to accept the testimony of these witnesses. So please be skeptical, but that is not the same as prejudiced and closed-minded. This is a matter of great importance, and I ask the media, the scientific community, and the political community to look seriously at this matter and to do the right thing for humanity and for our children. We have available for the media and for members of Congress a nearly 500-page briefing document with transcripts from dozens of these top-secret witnesses. We have a 4-hour videotape summary. It's not a commercial product, I'll warn you, from this project of the 120 hours that we have in interviews so far. They've been boiled down to 4 hours, and it's available for the Congress to review and for the major media to review. We can establish that this subject is real and has tremendous significance for the human future. I ask on all of you who are listening to contact the members of Congress that represent you and the leaders around the world and other countries and ask them to hold an honest inquiry into this subject, to support a ban on weaponizing space, since we are sharing space with other life forms, and that we move quickly as a people to understanding that this is the end of the childhood of the human race. It is time for us to become mature adults in the cosmic civilizations out there. To do this, we must become a peaceful civilization, and we must look as we go into space with an intent of cooperating with other civilizations, not weaponizing that high frontier. The men and women who will speak next will do so in order, beginning on your left. They will introduce themselves. I ask for the media to refrain from questions until each witness has spoken briefly about who they are and what they have personally been involved with or witnessed in their government, military, or government-connected careers. At the end, we will have questions. All of you may ask questions for as long as we can stay here, and we will provide you with all the information that you need. So we will begin now with the first of our witnesses, Mr. John Callahan.
My name is Dan Willis. I was in the United States Navy. I held a top secret crypto level 14 extra sensitive material handling security clearance. I worked in the code room at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco. In 1969, I received a priority message from a ship near Alaska that was classified as secret. The ship reported emerging out of the ocean near Port Bow, a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, approximately 70 feet in diameter, emerged out of the water, shot into space, traveling at about 7,000 miles per hour. This was tracked on ship's radar and substantiated. Years later, I worked at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for 13 years. The co-worker who I worked with worked at the NORAD facility. When he first started working at the facility, he noticed objects going on the screens that track everything out in space and in the air, objects going off the scale, doing right-angle turns. When he inquired, his older supervisor advised him that, quote, it was just a visit from one of our little friends. He thought this was a little unusual. These statements are true. I'm willing to testify under oath before Congress. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Sheehan. I'm an attorney and serving as general counsel to the Disclosure Project. I'm a 1967 graduate of Harvard College in American Government Studies and Constitutional Law, and a graduate of Harvard Law School. And I served as general counsel and one of the co-counsel for the New York Times in the Pentagon Papers case, and was involved in briefing and arguing the case in front of the United States Supreme Court, giving permission to the New York Times to publish the classified documents, the 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers. Subsequent to that time, I served as special counsel to the office of F. Lee Bailey as one of the trial counsels when we represented James McCord in the Watergate burglary, and got Mr. McCord to write the letter to Judge Sirica to reveal the Watergate burglars' relationship to the plumbers unit in the White House at that time. Subsequent to my service in that case, I went back to Harvard to the Divinity School to study Judeo-Christian social ethics and public policy. Did my master's work and PhD work there, and became general counsel for the United States Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C., assigned to the National Social Ministries Office and their Public Policy Office. It was there in 1977 that I was contacted by Miss Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service. She asked to meet with me, and I met with her, and she informed me that President Carter, upon taking office in January of 1977, held a meeting with then the Director of Central Intelligence, who was George Bush Sr., and demanded that the Director of Central Intelligence turn over to the President the classified information about unidentified flying objects and the information that was in the possession of the United States intelligence community concerning the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This information was refused to the President of the United States by the Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr. The Director insisted that the President, in order to have access to this information, needed to have clearance to contact the Congressional Research Service, to contact the United States House of Representatives Science and Technology Division, to have them undertake a process to declassify this information, because the DCI suspected that the President was preparing to reveal this information to the American public. The Congressional Research Service Science and Technology Division, under the directorship of Marcia Smith, was contacted by the House Science and Technology Committee and instructed to undertake a major investigation of the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and the relationship of the UFO phenomenon to this. I was contacted by Ms. Smith and asked, in my capacity as general counsel to the United States Jesuit headquarters, National Social Ministry Office, to see if we could obtain access to the Vatican Library, to obtain the information that the Vatican had with regard to extraterrestrial intelligence and the phenomenon of the UFOs. I pursued that with the permission of Father William J. Davis, the director of the national office, and we were refused access as the United States Jesuit order to the information in the possession of the Vatican Library. When I reported this to Ms. Smith, she then later subsequently asked me to participate in a project which I can go into some detail during the question and answer period or later to individuals, pursuant to which I was given access to, as a special consultant to the United States Library of Congress Congressional Research Service, to the classified portions of the Blue Book project of the Air Force. At that point, it was in 1977, approximately May of 1977, I went to the Madison building of the United States Library of Congress. There was no one in the building at that time. It was brand new. I was directed to a basement office where there were two guards at the door and a third sitting at the table who took my identification, verified that I'd been designated as a special consultant to the Congressional Research Service of the United States Library of Congress, and was admitted to the room. I thereupon found photographs, some dozen photographs, of what is unquestionably an unidentified flying object on the ground that had crashed and plowed a furrow in a field of snow, and it was embedded in an embankment. There were United States Air Force personnel surrounding this craft, taking photographs of the craft. And one of the photographs, I could see that there were some symbols on the side of the craft. And so I proceeded through the photographs and found a close-up photograph of these symbols. I'd been instructed that I was to take no notes and had to leave my briefcase and all my identification outside of this room, but I had brought with me a yellow pad. And so what I did is I opened up the yellow pad and refocused the overhead camera onto the same size as the cardboard backing of the yellow pad, and I physically traced the copies of the symbols on the side of this craft, closed the yellow pad back, put the microfiche back into the canister, reclosed the box that I had, and I said, it is time for me to leave. And I took this and proceeded to leave the office, at which point the security guards stopped me, and one of them said, "What is that you have there, Mr. Sheehan?" At which point I handed the yellow pad to him, and he flipped through all the yellow pages and never found the copy that I had. And so I took that with me and brought it to the United States Jesuit headquarters, had a meeting with the staff, with Father William J. Davis, reported this to them, was authorized at that time by the United States Jesuit headquarters to make a report to the National Council of Churches and to request that the entire 54 major religious denominations of our country undertake a major study of extraterrestrial intelligence, which they declined to do. I was subsequently asked to deliver a 3-hour closed-door seminar to the top 50 scientists of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which I did do in 1977. I'm more than happy to testify under oath to these details to the United States Congress, and would be happy to meet with any members of the press at that time. You may recall I also served as chief counsel to the Karen Silkwood case, in which we obtained the rulings in the Karen Silkwood case. I also served as chief counsel in the Iran-Contra case. It was the first one to testify before the United States Congress to the existence of the off-the-shelf enterprise of Richard Secord and Albert Hakim. I'll be more than happy to share the details of what I believe to be the relationship between this off-the-shelf enterprise and the secret government which is concealing this information from the American public. And I am happy and proud to serve as general counsel to the Disclosure Project. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S. the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, you know, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand This is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. This is a system, he told me, that would never protect anyone. Even back then, he talked about suitcase bombs. He talked about chemical, viral, bacterial, biological warfare, that these space-based weapons would never protect us against. And then he told me that, in fact, if you travel around the world, which I did after he died in 1977, I met with people in over 100 countries who were friends. They didn't want to build space-based weapons. I became a space and missile defense consultant. And I worked with people around the world. I became an advisor to the People's Republic of China. They don't want to build a space-based weapon system. And he told me back then that they didn't. He said, go to Russia. They're considered to be the enemy. I got on a plane by myself. When I got to Russia, I had a list of people that I had read out of the newspaper. Chernenko was in office then. He was the only one I didn't get a chance to meet. They introduced me to everyone when I got there. And when I got back, I said, oh my Lord, this man is telling the truth. There is no threat. And I've been waiting until this day for 27 years, and I'm expecting the spin to happen, because he also explained to me that as a military strategist, as a person who worked on the MX missile, which I did later, he said, you will find that there is going to be a spin to find some enemy against whom we have to build space-based weapons. And now we should expect the spin, because he said part of the formula for the intelligence community is if they might have a weapon, then we have to consider that they do have these weapons. So now they do have these weapons, so now we have to build these weapon systems. And that's the formula, except that it's all based on a lie. And we have witnesses here today that have shown you that these extraterrestrial beings, that these craft that have come here are now not UFOs, they're identified flying objects, and we know that they have beings in them. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos, they can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments, who have the courage to come forward here to support what Wernher von Braun told me back in 1974 to 77. And I will testify before the Congress that when I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, which I shut down a few years ago because I didn't believe we had a chance with this huge, integrated around the world, complex weapon system, that we had any chance at all of transforming that war industry into a space industry that could provide benefits, like Dr. Greier has said, of global warming. We can end that situation of that problem. We can end the energy crisis. We can build now non-polluting technologies. Wernher von Braun used to tell me that we could have cars back then that drove around off the ground. He described this to me on beams so that we have no pollution on this planet. And we can solve the problems of the people that are urgent and potential, and the other animals and the other cultures on Earth and in space. And we can end the arms race without dislocating the industry jobs, without disrupting the economy, by transforming, Wernher von Braun told me, the war industry into a global cooperative space industry that will provide, he said, finally, more jobs and profits on this planet than during any hot or cold wartime, more products and services that can be applied directly to solving the problems of this planet. And we can have a whole planet now that lives in peace on Earth, with all the cultures on Earth, and with all the extraterrestrial cultures in space. And these are words that Wernher von Braun told me in 1974, and I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank each of the witnesses and for your patience. We're running about 50 minutes late, and I do apologize for that. I want to emphasize that all of these witnesses each could speak for probably anywhere from 2 to 5 hours about what they have witnessed. We were trying to give you a snapshot. We have another 400 of these witnesses. I have carried this burden for 8 years. I'm now giving it to you, the American people and the people of the world, to take it forward. What I'd like to do now is open the audience for questions from the media. You may address them to me or to an individual witness as you deem appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Maribel Gonzalez with Reforma, Mexican newspaper. I have 3 questions. One is, Yes, I wanted to know if there are laws in this country that in some way allowed this kind of secrecy or not. And then I wanted to know if there's a need to change any kind of law. And the next one I wanted to ask you, if you may, is who is profiting from this secrecy that maintains in secret the solution to the energy crisis? I mean...
Well, let me get to those, okay, quickly, because we are short on time. First of all, I think initially there was an appropriate national security apparatus in place in the 40s during the Truman and also Eisenhower years. By the late Eisenhower years, we have a testimony from Brigadier General Stephen Lubkin, still a practicing attorney, that by the late Eisenhower years that he had lost control of these projects primarily because of the compartmentalization into the military-industrial complex. Operative word industrial. There are corporations such as SAIC, Lockheed Martin, Northrop, and others that deal specifically with this issue, with advanced energy and propulsion systems connected to UFOs. And I think that what has happened, from the best we can tell, from insiders that have briefed me for now about 8 years, is that we have lost control of these projects from a constitutional law perspective because the infrastructure within military intelligence and corporate channels is so well funded and so complex and labyrinthine that there are compartments within compartments within compartments, and people who are in the Congress who make inquiries, and in fact President Clinton, when he made inquiries, were simply denied access, as you heard earlier that President Carter was denied access. On your other question, I would say that in terms of profiting from the status quo, big oil. There are certain geopolitical and financial infrastructures that would not welcome a definitive replacement to the fossil fuels. I will tell you, and we can prove this with other scientists who are ready to come forward, that we already have a complete replacement for any fossil fuels or ionizing nuclear power plants. We don't need them. We haven't needed them. Probably have not needed them since the time I was born. Now, of course, this is a major issue. You're talking a multi-trillion-dollar global infrastructure change. And so this does hit the alarm bells at the National Security Council economics area. However, what is more serious to the national security? Keeping the status quo or letting ourselves go into a global ecosystem collapse and running out of fossil fuels and having massive rolling blackouts, not just in California, but globally. We have got to do something about this, and soon, and that's why we are advocating open hearings in the Congress. Other media, please. Yes, sir.
I just want to know if anybody at the UN is looking into this.
I personally met with Boutros Ghali's wife, Aliyah Ghali, who said that her husband was quite concerned about this. This was in the 1990s. Since then, we know that there have been other people at the UN who've made inquiries. The problem is the UN has no mandate to deal with this. It needs to be given a mandate from its constituent member nations. And I think that the public and the member nations need to ask that the United Nations get involved with this. This is an international peace issue and an international security issue, and it should be taken up by the UN Security Council. And of course, we are recommending that as well. Yes, sir.
So I think my question is actually to My question is to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wondered if you could describe what they looked like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.
Yes, and as I call on you, please state the news agency that you were with. Yes, ma'am.
Deanne Divis with United Press International. Could you please address the vehicle that there was a drawing displayed of? Why would this vehicle be on display at an air show? What is the power source that you are asserting is going to be so very useful? And how can you determine that this vehicle is not something that is being developed, by a government agency?
In fact, I think that was the testimony. This is an alien reproduction vehicle, and just to be clear, this means that it is based on advanced anti-gravity and zero-point energy propulsion systems. Those are the propulsion systems. They are being manufactured by a consortium of companies that include Lockheed Martin, Northrop, SAIC, and other corporations. They do have superluminal capacity, in other words, faster than the speed of light capacity. I think Mr. McCandlish and other witnesses that he's identified could go into more of the technical physics of it. I'm just a country doctor from Virginia, I tell people. I mean, really. And but this is actually what is the reason it's called alien reproduction vehicle, is that it's based on the study of extraterrestrial vehicles, but it is manufactured by human military intelligence, aerospace contracting arrangements. And this is very important. It means that we, Homo sapiens, have the ability to access this so-called zero-point field of energy, which is the ambient field of energy from which all matter and energy is fluxing, and can access that energy and generate all the power we need to run this planet without fossil fuels or pollution.
Do you have any direct evidence, though, that this, we're talking about the same government that so appropriately named a snooper program Carnivore. So just because it's named the alien reproduction vehicle, considering the history and the questions that have been existing for such a long time about flying saucers, do you know, is there any direct reason to believe that this is actually derived from technology? Any of the witnesses who can attest to that? And how would this, a propulsion system, a rocket engine doesn't necessarily translate into electricity. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, the first part of your question, I would say that the testimony of witnesses we have, some of whom are here, others that are not here, but they're in the briefing materials, is that we have studied specifically extraterrestrial vehicles which have been retrieved. The breakthroughs in that research have led to applications that have led to the building of this and similar anti-gravity devices. And that, in fact, this can be proven in open testimony before Congress, and that is exactly what we are calling for. We have the witnesses to establish this, and they also have the documents and the specific details of the propulsion systems. But this is not a jet internal combustion system at all. It is actually kicked in by a type of electric power source, and it then accesses this ambient zero-point energy field that is responsible for all matter and energy existing, and by special configurations and what have you, it causes a cancellation of mass inertia and an anti-gravity effect. And this is a complex technical discussion, which is probably beyond the scope of this conference, but we have materials in the briefing document that we can provide you with references to people who have studied the anti-gravity effect as far back as certainly the 1950s. We have one witness who said that his family was connected to the RAND Corporation, and that by the mid-1950s that more money had been spent on anti-gravity propulsion systems than the totality of the Manhattan Project. So yes, we can establish those elements. Other questions?
Thank you. My name is Murray Felsher. I publish a newsletter downstairs here called the Washington Remote Sensing Letter that deals with reconnaissance and surveillance of the Earth from space. My question is this. Since 1972, with the launch of Landsat 1, and now with the launch of commercial space imagery, there are some archived, I would say, upwards of 35 million photographs of the Earth from space. And not one of them has shown a flying saucer. Are you suggesting that these have been airbrushed out?
We're suggesting that there is a system before the public gets hold of anything that's off of a government-connected satellite. There is a compartmented operation that does indeed sanitize them from this type of evidence. And I think the testimony of the gentleman who was with the Defense Intelligence Agency, Mr. Maynard, Ms. Hare, and others would substantiate that. We have other witnesses who have been involved in projects where such items have been sanitized out. It could also be that if you did a thorough search, you might find a few that slipped through. We obviously haven't had the research dollars to go through all the millions of images that are cataloged to look for them, but we do know there's been a very thorough sanitizing of this. And people should not be naive about the extent to which covert programs using billions of our tax dollars have been able to effectively hide this. This is one of the sort of myths of both the media and the public. It's sort of a Pollyanna myth that we live in a society where such things could not be done. In fact, they are done, and we can prove that they have been done.
Discredit these entire proceedings here, and I'm wondering how your screening process went. Can you tell us a little bit about your satisfaction level with that?
Well, I'm very satisfied that these are genuine and good people who are speaking truthfully. Out of 400 people that I'm dealing with, not 20 times this number, have I been fooled? Yeah, I'm an emergency doctor. Let me say something. People come into the emergency department with flank pain, writhing on a stretcher. What have they got? A kidney stone, right? Yeah, well, some of them go into the bathroom, prick their finger, and squeeze blood into the water, the urine sample, to show that they have blood in their urine so they can get a narcotic injection. Now, have I been scammed as an emergency doctor who has I'm bright enough not to kind of know when I'm being scammed, but have I occasionally? Yeah. Is it possible? It's possible. Is it likely? No. And here's what's more important. You don't not treat or accept the testimony or the history of every patient that comes in with flank pain and assume that they're lying just because you've been scammed once or twice. This field, you make a very good point, is filled with hoaxes and scams and what have you. It doesn't mean, however, that all of it is. And in fact, what we're saying after 8 years of research, we have found the documents, the top secret witnesses, the insiders willing to testify under oath before Congress that this is true. Now, here's another key point. Some of the people who are in this witness pool, Mr. Sheehan, myself, and a couple of other attorneys, are members of state licensed professions. And what that means is that if we are perpetrating a hoax, we will lose our license to practice medicine, we will lose our license to practice law, because we'll be perpetrating a hoax upon the public. So what I would say to you is that the group of people before you are very credible, and the others whom we have identified are. We are not the CIA. We have not been able to do a $50,000 background check on each person. I'll give you that caveat. But we have done very serious interviews and vetting. And by the way, these people have presented their DD-214s, their defense forms, other documentation that show the two DD-214s and others that show that they were in the military at a certain place and a certain time. So we're very comfortable that, in fact, that the weight of the testimony will carry the day here and that this is real.
I had an insight, and it relates to your question. there have been tens of thousands of sightings and experiences from all over the world. Only one of them needs to be true. Because if only one of them is true, then the entire case, the non-reality of these sightings, falls apart.
Such evidence out of the public domain, yes. A priori, all signed agreements and oaths that have flowed from such operations are null and void. What that means is, in legal theory, is that if it's an illegal enterprise, the agreements those that are entered into as a result of that illegal enterprise have no legal standing. So one of the things I would like to announce today is all of the men and women listening to this need to know they are free to speak. We are declaring all national security oaths on this subject null and void. They have flowed from illegal operations that have no standing constitutionally. My people, my mother's family, who fought in the American Revolution, were prisoner of war with the British to help found this country, did not fight and die to form the United States so that this kind of chicanery can go on. So these men are free to speak, and there can be no legal repercussions against them. We have legal counsel who will also support this theory, and we're taking this to other constitutional scholars. It is time for that game to end. It is time for a new era in the human experience. Yes.